White Rock to rise and make brief interventions. The honourable member from Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on a matter of grave, urgent, and time-sensitive importance. Your decision on whether to grant this emergency debate will be a life or death decision. And if you question that, let me share with you the statistics and the background. In May of 2022, the Prime Minister announced that he was granting the British Columbia NDP government an exemption to the criminal code prohibition on crack, heroin, meth, and other deadly drugs. In January of the following year, 2023, that exemption took effect, which decriminalized those aforementioned drugs and their use in playgrounds, hospitals, parks, transit, and other places where children and vulnerable people are exposed to the risks. The results are now in, and they are irrefutable. In the 12 months that followed the decriminalization of these hard drugs, British Columbia had a record-smashing 2,500 drug overdose deaths. This represents a 380% increase in said deaths since the Prime Minister took office. In other words, in the period since these policies came into effect, we've seen drug overdose deaths increase by a factor of 4. Furthermore, Canada is now the fastest growing, has the fastest growing drug overdose death rate and the second highest total rate of any of the 11 countries reviewed by the Commonwealth Fund. In other words, people are dying as a direct result of these policies. This is not simply my claim, it is now the NDP government's admission. As I said at the outset, it was the NDP government that asked for the decriminalization that the Prime Minister granted. That provincial government has now reversed itself and has asked for the government to urgently recriminalize drugs in many public places, an admission that this policy is taking lives. Mr. Speaker, this is where the urgency comes. Every day in British Columbia, 6 people die of drug overdoses. This is by far the highest overdose rate anywhere in Canada, something that even the NDP government is now attributing, in part, to the decriminalization. Unfortunately, that government needs the federal government's permission to reimpose criminal sanctions on those drugs, something that the minister refused to grant today, which means that even though the NDP government in BC wants to recriminalize, as I stand here and as the clock ticks, decriminalization is in place. Every single day that goes by before the Prime Minister reverses himself, decriminalized drugs will be killing people on the streets of Vancouver, on Vancouver Island, in the Lower Mainland, and in other places across the province.
I ask the honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby please to hold his comments until he has the floor. The honourable member from Carleton has the floor.
Anyone who does not believe 6 deaths per day is not an emergency needs to give their head a shake. Anybody who says that 2,500 deaths a year is not an emergency needs to give their head a shake. These numbers, by the way, Mr. Speaker, do not include the indirect deaths that are caused by drug-induced crime on innocent bystanders who might just be taking their kids to a local Starbucks before they get stabbed in front of their family and die in a puddle of their own blood, to be broadcast on social media, as we've seen. Those are the kinds of horrific scenes that have become commonplace ever since this Prime Minister and the NDP radical policy was implemented. So, given that we're losing 6 lives a day, given that the reversal of the policy could prevent some of those lost lives, or at the very least, such a matter should be debated, and given that the clock is ticking as the NDP government in BC awaits a decision from this Prime Minister and his Health Minister, this is an emergency. And we ask you to join with common sense Conservatives to allow for this debate to happen immediately so that we can stop the drugs, disorder, death, and destruction that the radical NDP Liberal decriminalization policy has caused. Thank you.